A single dad returns a lost phone he finds at a dine Runaway. It belongs to a runaway heiress, desperate to escape her past and ready to rewrite her future with him. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The lunch crowd had thinned to a low hum inside Rosie's diner, the kind of place where the coffee was always hot and the vinyl booths creaked with age. Jack Morgan sat at the far corner of the counter, sipping his usual black coffee and a BLT with too much mayo. The overhead fan rattled gently, and country music played low from an old jukebox near the door. He'd just finished a half day at the shop, his hands still faintly smelling of engine grease, no matter how hard he scrubbed. He glanced at the clock. Almost time to pick up Lily from school. Sliding off the stool, he left a few crumpled bills on the counter and reached for his coat when he spotted something near the end booth. A phone. Slim. New. Face down on the vinyl seat. For a second, he considered walking out. Someone would come back for it, right? But then he thought of Lily, and how panicked she got the one time she'd left her tablet at the library. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. No case. No lock screen picture, just a sleek black screen and a few smudges of fingerprints. He tapped the side button. Battery low, 5%. A few notifications flickered on. Missed calls from a number labeled Vivian. Jack frowned, looking around. No one seemed to be searching for anything, just a few regulars nursing coffee and talking about the weather. He took a breath, pocketed the phone, and pushed open the diner door. Outside, the air was crisp, spring barely shaking off the last chills of winter. He walked toward his pickup, climbed in, and set the phone on the passenger seat beside a half-eaten granola bar and Lily's forgotten art project. The phone buzzed. A call. He hesitated, then tapped accept. "Hello?" he said. A woman's voice, breathless. "Oh, thank God. Did someone find this phone?" "Yeah," Jack replied. "Found it at Rosie's diner about 10 minutes ago." A pause. Then, "I'm on my way back. Please don't leave. I'll be right there." Jack blinked, brow furrowed. "All right. I'll wait." He ended the call, staring at the phone as if it had just opened a door he hadn't meant to knock on. Back in his truck, Jack sat behind the wheel with the engine off, the silence oddly loud. The phone lay on the center console, its sleek black screen catching bits of sunlight through the windshield. He glanced at it, then away, tapping the steering wheel with his thumb. It buzzed once more, but this time just a notification. Battery critically low. He picked it up again, angling it toward himself. The screen lit up briefly, offering a glimpse before fading to black. One missed call. Same name as before, Vivian. Not mom, or work, or anything obvious. Just Vivian, who names themselves on someone else's phone. Someone who expected to be recognized, maybe. Or maybe someone who didn't want to leave a trail. Jack pressed the side button again. Locked, of course. No wallpaper photo, no hints, just a numeric keypad. No chance guessing that. He considered turning it in to the sheriff's station, but he knew how things went in a town like theirs. It'd sit in a drawer behind the front desk, half forgotten and gathering dust, especially if no one came asking. And something about the woman's voice, urgent, careful, had stuck with him. He reached into the glove compartment, pulled out an old charging cable, and plugged the phone in. He didn't know why he cared this much. Maybe it was the idea of someone being stranded, phoneless, in a strange town. Maybe it was habit-fixing things. He waited, drumming his fingers. Another buzz. Missed call. Vivian. Again. Persistent, he muttered. He turned the engine over just as a sleek silver sedan pulled into the lot, its tires crunching gravel. The car didn't belong, too polished, too quiet. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out tall, coat cinched tight, sunglasses pushed into her dark hair. She moved quickly, scanning the lot. Jack rolled down his window, phone in hand. Her eyes locked on the device. "That's it," she said, breath-catching. "That's my phone." Jack nodded slowly. "You're Vivian?" She hesitated, then gave a small, tense smile. Something like that. He handed it out the window, but his curiosity lingered. Something about her seemed too polished for this town, and way too nervous for someone just picking up a lost phone. The phone buzzed again, vibrating softly against the cracked leather console like it had something urgent to say. Jack glanced at the screen. Incoming call, Vivian, same name. Same moment of hesitation. He looked out the windshield. The parking lot was still empty except for a rusted-out pickup 2 rows over and a beat-up sedan with a cracked taillight. Nothing out of place. Everything quiet. But the phone in his hand buzzed again, more insistent this time. He sighed, swiped to answer, and brought it to his ear. Hello? Silence for a beat, then a breathless voice, female, sharp-edged but smooth, like someone who'd learned to control panic, even when it bubbled under the surface. Hi-oh, thank God. Is this... Did someone find a phone? Mine? Jack adjusted in his seat. Yeah. Found it in the back booth at Rosie's Diner. Another breath. Okay. That's good. Thank you. 2 need it. I can come get it. Are you still there? Yeah, I'm in the parking lot, Jack said, glancing toward the diner's glass doors. I was about to leave, but figured someone'd be calling soon. Don't go, she said quickly, urgency slipping through her composed tone. Please, I'm not far. A pause. I just need that phone back. Her voice didn't fit the town. Not just the accent neutral, maybe East Coast, but the way she spoke. Too careful, too polished. Like someone used to boardrooms and negotiation tables, not small diners and cracked linoleum floors. Jack nodded, forgetting she couldn't see him. All right, I'll wait a bit. Thank you, she said again, softer now. Really. The call ended with a click. Jack set the phone back on the console and leaned back in his seat. There was something in her voice that didn't sit quite right. Grateful, yes, but also tense, like she was running from something. Or maybe toward something she didn't want to face. He looked out toward the road, engine off, windows down just enough to let the breeze in. Somewhere out there, a woman named Vivian was on her way, and she didn't sound like someone who lost things often. The next morning, Jack stood near the edge of Pine Hill Park, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn denim jacket. The sky was a soft gray, the kind that made everything feel quiet, like the world was still stretching awake. Across the playground, a couple of kids climbed rusted monkey bars, while their parents sipped coffee from to-go cups. Life moved slow here, predictable, comfortable. He spotted her almost immediately. Vivian. She stepped out of a sleek black car parked near the curb, her coat cinched tight against the chill, sunglasses perched on top of her head like she hadn't realized the clouds weren't going anywhere today. She walked with purpose, but there was a stiffness in her posture, like someone trying too hard to blend in and failing at every step. Her boots weren't made for gravel paths. Her blouse looked too crisp for a town that barely ironed its church clothes, and when her eyes met Jack's, there was something guarded there, sharp, measuring. Jack gave her a small nod. She approached slowly. "You're Jack?" she asked. "Yep." He pulled the phone from his jacket and held it out. "This yours?" She took it gently, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath all night. "Thank you. I honestly didn't think I'd see it again." "No problem," Jack said, watching her power it on. "Didn't figure it belonged to anyone around here. Most folks wouldn't leave without it, and they sure wouldn't forget it in a booth." That made her smile, just a little. "Yeah, I was distracted." Jack raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. She didn't offer more. For a moment, they stood in silence, the wind rustling through the trees, kids shouting in the distance. Vivian glanced at the park around them as if she wasn't sure what to do now. Like this wasn't her world, and she wasn't entirely sure how she'd ended up in it. "You're not from around here," Jack said, not a question, just a fact. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Is it that obvious?" Jack shrugged. "This town's like an old sweater. We notice new threads." Vivian let out a soft laugh, but there was still something unreadable in her gaze, like she was waiting for someone to ask the wrong question so she could disappear again. Vivian didn't leave right away. She held the phone in her hand like it was something fragile, glancing at it once more before slipping it into her bag. Then she looked at Jack, squinting slightly against the morning light. "Let me buy you a coffee," she said. Jack shook his head instinctively. "No need." She crossed her arms, not defensive, but firm. "I insist. It's the least I can do after you saved me from a complete meltdown yesterday." He hesitated. He didn't usually take time for strangers, especially not ones with expensive coats and tense smiles. But something about her voice, her insistence without arrogance, made him pause. Besides, Lily was still at school for another hour, and the truck needed gas. He could spare 10 minutes. "All right," he said. "There's a place across the street." They walked in silence to the corner mug, the little cafe with chipped mugs and a bell that jingled too loud when you opened the door. Vivian looked around with something close to curiosity as they stepped inside. The place was warm, the smell of cinnamon and strong coffee floating in the air. They sat at a small table by the window. She ordered a latte. Jack stuck with regular black. No fuss. "So," she said, blowing gently on her drink, "do you always go out of your way for lost phones?" Jack gave a half smile. "Only the ones that buzz, like they're haunted." Vivian laughed, and for the first time it sounded real. Not polite, not practiced, just human. "What do you do?" she asked. "Mechanic. Got a small shop on Lincoln, mostly trucks and farm rigs. The occasional broken lawnmower. Sounds peaceful," she said, and Jack couldn't tell if she meant it or if she just didn't know what else to say. "I've got a daughter, Lily. She's 7 going on 17. His voice softened when he said it. Vivian tilted her head, interested. "You raise her alone?" "Yeah. Been just us since her mom passed. It's not always easy, but we manage." She didn't offer pity, just a quiet nod. "I think that's why I forgot my phone," she said after a moment. "I was so caught up thinking about everything I've walked away from, I didn't notice what I'd left behind." Jack sipped his coffee. "Happens." Vivian met his eyes. "Does it?" she asked. He didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. They stepped out of the cafe into the cool afternoon air, their coffees still warm in hand. The town had settled into its usual rhythm, slow, unhurried, the way Jack liked it. Across the street, he could see the school bus winding its way toward Maple Grove Elementary right on time. Vivian paused at the corner, adjusting the strap of her handbag on her shoulder. Jack followed her gaze, and there it was, the car. Parked along the curb like it didn't belong in this zip code. A gleaming black coupe, sleek and foreign. The kind of car that didn't come with cup holders because people who drove them weren't stopping at gas stations for snacks. The sunlight bounced off its flawless surface, drawing more than a few side glances from passers-by. Jack let out a quiet whistle. "Is that yours?" Vivian smiled without looking at him. "Just borrowed." He raised an eyebrow. "From who? Batman?" That earned a short laugh. "It's complicated." Jack stared at the car a moment longer. He could name the make and model, worked on enough engines to recognize quality when he saw it. But it wasn't just the car that felt out of place. It was her. Vivian, standing there with her perfectly pressed coat and city walk confidence, didn't blend into the backdrop of dusty sidewalks and hand-painted storefronts. She stood out, like someone who'd wandered off the cover of a glossy magazine into a Norman Rockwell painting. She noticed the way he looked at the car, and maybe at her too. "I know," she said softly. "I don't fit here." Jack shrugged. "Depends what you're trying to fit into." Vivian turned to face him. There was something behind her, expression tired, maybe. Or just too used to pretending. "I should get going," she said. He nodded. "Thanks for the coffee." She opened the door to the car, paused, and looked over her shoulder. "You said your daughter's name is Lily?" "Yeah." Vivian smiled, softer this time. "She's lucky to have you." Then the engine purred to life, smooth as silk, and just like that, she was gone, leaving behind a swirl of exhaust and a man standing still, trying to figure out what exactly had just passed through his world. The next time Jack saw her, it wasn't planned. It was late afternoon, the kind of spring day where the air still carried a bite, but the sun made promises it hadn't quite figured out how to keep. Jack had stopped by Rosie's diner to drop off a new starter for Joe's ancient Ford when he noticed her, Vivian, sitting in a corner booth by the window, hunched over her phone. He wouldn't have stopped, not usually. But something about the way she looked, shoulders tight, fingers tangled in her hair, gave him pause. He stepped inside, nodded to Rosie behind the counter, and approached slowly. Vivian didn't see him. Her voice was low, urgent, and she had her back mostly turned. The booth across from her was empty, her untouched coffee slowly cooling beside a folded napkin. "No, I told you," she was saying, teeth clenched around the words. "Don't send anyone else. I'm fine." Jack froze, just out of sight. "I don't care what he said," she snapped quietly. "If they show up here, it's over. I'm not going back, and I swear if he sends his men to drag me home." She paused. Her voice wavered, just for a second. "He'll lose me for good." The line went quiet. Vivian sighed, rubbed her forehead, then slowly hung up. Jack shifted, just enough to make his presence known. She looked up, startled. For a split second, the mask dropped fear, anger, weariness, and then it was back. "Hey," she said, voice soft now. "Didn't see you." He nodded toward the booth. "Didn't mean to overhear." Vivian forced a smile. "I'm sure it sounded worse than it is." Jack pulled up a chair, but didn't sit. "You running from someone?" Her smile faltered. She looked away. "Not someone. Something." Jack didn't push. But the tension was a living thing now, humming between them. Her world, whatever it was, had cracks running straight through it. And Jack, with his quiet hands and small-town steadiness, was beginning to realize just how far she'd come to get here, and maybe how far someone might go to take her back. The bell above the diner door gave its usual jingle as Vivian stepped inside, and even that small sound seemed too polished for the place. Rosie's diner wasn't fancy. It didn't try to be. It was chipped mugs and mismatched stools, pancakes served on plates older than most of the regulars. Jack had his usual corner seat at the counter, halfway through a turkey club, and nursing a glass of sweet tea when he saw her walk in. She was dressed down this time, jeans, a gray sweater, hair pulled back like she was trying not to be noticed, but she still stood out. She always did. He raised an eyebrow as she approached, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Twice in 1 week," he said. "People start talking." Vivian smiled, that same guarded curve of her lips that never quite reached her eyes. "Let them," she said, then nodded at the stool next to him. "Mind if I sit?" "Free country," Jack said, gesturing. She slid into the seat beside him, scanning the laminated menu like she hadn't already decided what she wanted. "What's good here?" Jack smirked. "Well, if you like your coffee strong enough to dissolve paint and your pie sweeter than sin, you're in the right place." Vivian laughed, a soft sound that made Rosie glance up from the far end of the counter. It wasn't often someone like her came in twice, much less looked like she was staying. "So," Jack said after a pause, "what brings you back?" Vivian glanced at him, something flickering behind her expression nerves. Maybe, or hope. "Figured I owed you a lunch, and maybe some company." Jack leaned back a little, studying her. "You always repay favors with pie?" "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "Just the ones that matter." Rosie came over with a fresh pot and a grin. "New friend, Jack?" Vivian answered before he could. "Something like that." Jack chuckled and shook his head, picking up his sandwich. He didn't know what this was, not really. But she was here, sitting beside him, asking for nothing but a quiet place and a little time. And somehow, that felt like the start of something neither of them knew how to name just yet. Saturday morning came with the soft hum of lawnmowers and the smell of fresh-cut grass drifting through open windows. Jack stood on the porch, sipping coffee from a chipped mug that read, "One Dad," watching as Lily danced around the yard in her mismatched socks and an oversized hoodie that nearly swallowed her whole. Vivian pulled into the driveway a few minutes past 10, right on time, wearing jeans and sneakers, her hair pulled into a low braid. She looked normal, or at least like she was trying to be. Lily spotted her first. "Dad, she's here." Jack raised an eyebrow. "She has a name, you know. Vivian." Lily called out, running toward the car like she'd been waiting all week for this moment. Vivian stepped out, laughing as Lily launched into a one-sided conversation about the strawberry patch they'd planted and how Jack had tried to build a birdhouse but accidentally nailed it shut. Jack watched from the porch, arms crossed. "Didn't expect you to show up," he said when she joined him. "I said I would," Vivian replied, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Besides, I wanted to see that famous strawberry patch." They spent the morning weeding the garden, Vivian and Lily chatting like old friends while Jack pretended not to be surprised. Vivian listened, asked questions, even got her hands dirty, which amused Lily to no end. "You're not like the other grown-ups," Lily said at one point, squinting up at her. Vivian blinked. "Is that a good thing?" Lily nodded. "You don't talk to me like I'm just a kid." Vivian smiled, a little wistfully. "Well, maybe that's because I never really got to be one myself." Later, while Lily colored on the porch, Jack handed Vivian a glass of lemonade. She took it with a grateful nod, looking out over the street lined with faded mailboxes and neighbors mowing their lawns. "It's quiet here," she said. "Feels safe." Jack leaned against the railing. "Is that so rare for you?" She didn't answer right away, just sipped her drink, eyes fixed on nothing. "You'd be surprised how loud life gets when it's full of people who want things from you." Jack said nothing. He didn't push, but deep down, he wondered just how far she'd run to find this kind of quiet and how long it would be before someone came looking to take it from her. The scent of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filled the kitchen, warm and comforting. Jack moved around the stove with practiced ease, flipping vegetables in a skillet while keeping an ear out for Lily, who was busy setting the table with an enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could manage. Vivian sat at the counter, watching the scene unfold with quiet amusement. She'd offered to help, but Jack waved her off with a simple, "We've got a rhythm." So she stayed where she was, sipping water from a mason jar and absorbing the kind of evening that felt like it belonged in a storybook. "Forks on the left, right?" Lily asked, brow furrowed in concentration. "Right," Jack said, then caught himself and chuckled. "Ay, meñas, forks go on the left." Vivian smiled as Lily darted past her to grab napkins. "She's a good kid," she said softly. Jack nodded. "She's my whole world." Dinner was loud in the way that only a small family meal can be. Lily talked non-stop about a school art contest. Jack chimed in with teasing remarks, and the clink of silverware punctuated every story. Vivian didn't say much at first. She just listened, smiling, laughing, taking it all in, like someone who wasn't sure if it was real. Midway through dessert store-bought brownies that Lily insisted on cutting herself, Vivian grew quiet. She set down her fork and glanced toward the window, the porch light casting soft reflections on the glass. "I never had this growing up," she said suddenly. Jack looked up. "Dinner?" "This," she said, motioning to the table. "People laughing, talking. A kitchen that smells like food someone actually cooked. I had dining rooms with crystal chandeliers and housekeepers who brought out trays. But we never really sat down together. Not like this." Lily, still chewing a brownie, tilted her head. "Didn't you have a mom and dad?" Vivian's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I did. Still do, technically, but they were always busy being important." Jack didn't say anything right away. He just passed her the last brownie and gave her a look that said she didn't have to explain more than that. Vivian took the brownie slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the plate. "This feels more like home than anything I grew up with." Lily grinned. "Then you should come over more." Vivian blinked, surprised. Then she laughed light and real. "You know what, Lily? I just might." It was subtle at first, easy to write off as coincidence. The first time Jack noticed the black SUV, It was Tuesday even, parked across the street from the garage just after closing. He'd been locking up, wiping the last of the oil from his hands, when he saw it idling near the curb. Tinted windows, spotless finish, plates that didn't look local. He chalked it up to someone lost or waiting for a friend. Big city people got turned around in Maplewood all the time. The second time was Thursday. Same SUV, different spot this time near the park where he and Lily often walked after dinner. Jack spotted it parked under the shade of an oak tree, engine running, driver hidden behind the glass. As soon as he made eye contact, the SUV pulled away. Now it was Saturday, and there it was again. This time, outside his house. Jack stood on the porch, mug of coffee cooling in his hand, eyes narrowed as he watched the vehicle sit motionless across the street. No movement. No one got out. The sun hadn't fully risen, casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood. Maplewood wasn't the kind of town that tolerated lingering strangers. You either belonged or you were passing through, and no one passed through 3 times in 1 week without a reason. He walked down the steps slowly, pretending to check the mailbox, even though he knew damn well it was empty. The SUV didn't move. Lily's voice called from inside. "Dad? Pancakes?" "Be there in a sec," Jack answered. As he turned back toward the house, the SUV started. Quiet. Clean. And then it pulled away again, disappearing around the corner like it hadn't just been watching them. By the time he came back into the kitchen, his stomach felt tight. Vivian sat at the table, hair still damp from the shower, helping Lily measure out flour. She looked up, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Jack cleared his throat. "You notice anything strange around the neighborhood lately?" Vivian paused, spoon mid-air. "Strange how?" "Black SUV. Been hanging around. Same one, I think." Her smile faltered just for a second. Jack caught it. "I'm probably just being cautious," he said slowly. Vivian set the spoon down. "Maybe you're not." The storm rolled in fast, too fast for a town like Maplewood, where weather usually came with warning. 1 minute the sky was a dull gray. The next it cracked open like a snapped branch. Thunder groaning across the fields. Rain pelted the roads in heavy sheets, and the wind twisted the trees like they were made of paper. Jack had just finished tucking Lily into bed when the first flicker of lightning lit up the windows. He glanced at the forecast again, frowning. Nothing about this had been in the report. He heard the front door open and footsteps on the mat. Then Vivian's voice from the living room. "I tried to leave," she called out, soaked and out of breath. Didn't make it far. Jack stepped into the hallway, towel in hand. "You walked back?" "I only made it to the truck before the sky opened up." She laughed once, short and breathless, brushing wet hair from her face. "Figured I was better off not hydroplaning into a cornfield." He tossed her the towel. "You're dripping on the rug." "Not my intention." They stood in the quiet a moment, save for the storm pressing against the windows like it wanted in. Jack motioned toward the couch. "You can wait it out here. I've got some extra clothes if you want something dry." Vivian hesitated just a flicker, then nodded. "Thanks." He returned with an old flannel and sweatpants folded neatly in his arms. She took them with a small smile, vanishing down the hall to change. When she returned, the sleeves swallowed her hands. The pants cinched awkwardly at the waist, but she looked more relaxed than he'd seen her in days. They ended up in the living room, sitting across from each other, separated by a mug of tea and the sound of the rain hammering the roof. "You're not great at asking questions, are you?" she said after a long pause. Jack raised a brow. "I ask when I need to." Vivian traced the rim of her mug with one finger. "Most people in my life ask because they want something. And what do I want?" She looked up, eyes soft. "That's what I can't figure out." He leaned back. "Maybe I just want to know who's really sitting in my living room." Vivian smiled faintly. "Someone who's not sure anymore. About a lot of things." The lights flickered, then steadied. Neither of them moved. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, it was warmened somehow. Despite everything, it felt like the safest place either of them had been in a long time. The storm had quieted by midnight, but the house still felt wrapped in its echo. Rain tapped gently on the windows now, and the wind had softened to a distant sigh. Jack sat on the edge of the couch, a faded quilt draped over his shoulders. Across the room, Vivian leaned back in the recliner, her legs curled under her, the oversized flannel still hanging off her frame like it belonged to someone else. Neither of them had moved in a while. The TV played a low, forgettable movie neither of them was watching. Silence filled the space between them, but it wasn't heavy, it was waiting. Vivian shifted. "Can I ask you something?" Jack looked over. "Sure. Do you ever feel like your life ended and restarted without you noticing?" Jack took a sip from his mug before answering. "Yeah, the day Lily was born, and again the day her mom died. Both times, the world just changed." Vivian nodded slowly, like she understood more than she was ready to say. Jack set the mug down. "What about you?" Vivian hesitated. Then she exhaled, long and tired. "You know my name's Vivian, but what I didn't tell you is my full name." She looked over at him. "Vivian Lancaster." Jack blinked. "As in?" "Lancaster Global, Lancaster Tower, Lancaster Automotive." That Lancaster. He let that sink in. "I figured you might have heard the name," she added softly. Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're telling me you walked away from all that?" Vivian gave a hollow laugh. "Ran, actually. There's a difference." Jack didn't press, just waited. "My father's a billionaire. Built an empire from nothing, or so he says. I was supposed to take over, marry right, speak right, play the part." She looked away. "But I hated it. I hated the pressure, the lies, the way everyone smiled at me like they knew how my life should go." She rubbed her thumb over the edge of the quilt. "One day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. So I packed a bag, left my phone behind tried to and drove until the road got quiet." Jack's voice was gentle. "And it led you here." Vivian nodded. "Yeah, to a lost phone, a stranger, with grease on his hands, and a little girl who thinks pancakes can fix anything." Jack offered a small smile. "She's not wrong." Vivian looked at him then, really looked. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. Jack didn't have an answer, but he didn't need one. Sometimes, the truth didn't come with solutions, just silence, a warm quilt, and someone who chose to stay even after the storm passed. Morning light crept through the living room curtains, casting soft stripes across the floorboards. The storm was gone, leaving behind a damp, earthy stillness. Jack stood in the kitchen, frying eggs in a cast-iron skillet, the sizzle of oil the only sound as the house slowly woke up. Vivian sat at the small table, her hair still damp from a quick shower, Jack's flannel shirt buttoned loosely over her borrowed clothes. She cradled a mug of coffee like it was armor. She looked rested, but something in her eyes was tighter now, like she knew the peace wouldn't last. Jack didn't say anything at first. He just plated breakfast, set it on the table, and poured himself a cup of coffee. Then he sat across from her, elbows on the table, fingers wrapped around his mug. "I need to be straight with you," he said. Vivian nodded slowly. "Okay. I've got rules," Jack began, his voice steady low. "Most of them aren't written down, but they're there. And the first one is, this nothing gets between me and Lily's safety. Not ever." Her shoulders tensed. "You think I'm dangerous?" "I think the things chasing you are." He held her gaze. "I've got a kid sleeping down the hall who still thinks the worst thing in the world is a missed bedtime story. I'm not about to let that change because someone from your world decides they want you back." Vivian didn't argue, didn't flinch. She just nodded, eyes fixed on her mug. "I understand." Jack exhaled. "That said." She looked up. "I'm not going to kick you out. Not yet. Not unless you lie to me again." "I didn't." "You didn't tell me the truth," he said gently. "That's the same thing when there's a kid involved." Vivian sat back, the weight of it all pressing down on her. "I didn't mean to bring trouble here." Jack's tone softened. "I believe that. But intent and consequence don't always match up. A silence settled between them. "I'm not asking for forever," she said finally. "Just a little time to figure out what comes next." Jack nodded. "Then take it. But just know, the second I feel Lily's at risk, this ends." Vivian swallowed hard, then nodded. "That's fair." They sat in quiet for a while longer, the sun warming the walls. Two people on opposite ends of a line, neither of them had drawn but both knew exactly where it was. Vivian told him she had a place. It slipped out casually one afternoon, over takeout containers and Lily's nonstop chatter about a school project. Jack had asked, not accusing, just curious where she was staying, how long she planned to stick around. She smiled, wiped her mouth with a napkin and said, "A friend outside of town. She's letting me crash until I figure things out." Jack didn't press. He wanted to believe her. And maybe a part of him did. But something didn't sit right. A few days later, Jack stopped by the grocery store after a long day at the shop. He was just grabbing milk and cereal when he spotted the black coupe parked at the edge of the lot, partially hidden beneath the shade of a tree. At first, he thought it might have just been another car like hers. They weren't common, but they existed. Then he saw her. Vivian was curled up in the driver's seat, a blanket pulled over her lap, a paperback balanced in her hand. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, and she was wearing the same sweatshirt she'd borrowed from Jack's laundry pile 3 nights ago. A coffee cup sat empty in the cup holder, and a duffel bag sat in the back seat, half unzipped. She hadn't seen him. Jack lingered behind the corner of a neighboring vehicle, jaw clenched. He didn't move. Didn't know what he'd even say. Eventually, she set the book down, rubbed her face with both hands, and started the engine. The car pulled out slowly, disappearing down the road without ever knowing it had been watched. That night, Jack didn't sleep. The next morning, as he brewed coffee and packed Lily's lunch, Vivian knocked on the back door like she always did, 3 soft taps, then silence. He opened it and stepped aside, letting her in without a word. "You okay?" she asked. Jack didn't answer at first. He poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. Then he looked her dead in the eye. "Why did you lie?" Vivian froze, hand tightening around the mug. "Jack, you said you had a place. A friend." "I didn't want you to feel responsible," she whispered. "You're sleeping in your car, Vivian." She looked down. "I know." The kitchen was quiet, save for the distant sound of Lily humming to herself in the next room. Jack exhaled, slow and heavy. "You don't get to protect my feelings by lying. Not in my house. Not around my kid." Vivian nodded, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry." Jack didn't yell, didn't walk away. He just said, "Next time, you tell me the truth first." And, somehow, that cut deeper than anything else. The invitation came the next evening, quietly, without fanfare. Vivian had shown up at the shop just after closing, her arms folded tightly across her chest, the wind tugging at loose strands of hair. Jack was locking the front door, wiping his hands on a rag, when he saw her standing there by the truck. He didn't ask why she came. He already knew. "You hungry?" he asked instead. She nodded, silent. They drove back to the house, music low on the radio, a shared silence between them that somehow felt full rather than empty. Lily was already at home with the neighbor's daughter, playing board games in the living room when they arrived. Vivian offered to help with dinner, and Jack didn't stop her this time. Later, after Lily had gone to bed and the dishes were drying on the counter, Jack leaned against the doorframe and watched Vivian tuck the blanket around herself on the couch. "You don't have to keep sleeping in your car," he said quietly. Vivian looked up, surprised. "Jack, I've got a spare room. Nothing fancy, but it beats bucket seats and cold mornings." He paused. "Just until you figure things out." Her fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. "Are you sure?" He nodded once. "I don't offer things I don't mean." She looked at him then, something soft flickering in her eyes. "You're not making this easy." "What's that supposed to mean?" "You keep making me want to stay." For a moment, Neither of them moved. The air shifted, thick with something unspoken. Not just gratitude, not just kindness. Something else. Something that had been building for days, maybe weeks. Jack stepped closer, close enough to notice the way her breath caught. "You make it hard to look the other way," he said, voice low. Vivian swallowed, her gaze locked with his. "So don't." He didn't. Not for a long moment, but he didn't kiss her either. Not yet. Instead, he pulled back just enough to murmur, "We'll take this slow. I've got a kid to think about." Vivian nodded. "And I've got a life I'm still running from." But the truth hung in the air between them anyway. Whatever this was, it wasn't just temporary anymore. And neither of them wanted to pretend otherwise. The night was calm in that slow, familiar way Maplewood had perfected. Crickets hummed in the fields beyond Jack's backyard, and the porch light cast a soft golden glow over the wooden steps. Jack sat with a beer in one hand, his legs stretched out, boots tapping the worn railing. Vivian sat beside him, wrapped in one of Lily's spare blankets, her hair slightly tousled from the breeze. Lily had gone to bed hours ago, after a long day of chasing fireflies and convincing Jack to let her eat a popsicle before dinner. The house was quiet now, save for the occasional creak of the screen door and the whisper of wind through the trees. They hadn't talked much that night. There hadn't been a need. Jack took a slow sip, then glanced over at her. "You settling in all right?" Vivian nodded. "It's strange. I thought being in one place would make me restless, but—" She looked out into the darkness. "It's peaceful here, honest. That's Maplewood for you. Nothing but truth and rust." She smiled faintly. "I needed both, I think." They lapsed into silence again. Jack could feel the space between them not wide, not distant, just full. Something had been building for days. In the way she touched Lily's hair when she laughed. In how she asked about his late wife without tiptoeing. In the quiet moments like this, where nothing was said but everything was understood. Vivian shifted beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "Jack," she said, just above a whisper. He turned toward her. "Yeah?" But she didn't speak. She just looked at him, eyes open, searching, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with choice. And Jack, without thinking, leaned in. It wasn't a dramatic kiss. There were no fireworks or swelling music. Just the soft press of lips under a porch light. The breath of two people who hadn't expected it but couldn't stop it either. When they pulled apart, neither of them moved right away. Vivian's voice was barely audible. That wasn't the plan. Jack's eyes stayed on hers. No, but it felt right. And in that stillness, with the night wrapped around them like a secret, neither of them dared to argue. It started with a whisper. Jack was waiting outside Lily's school like he always did, leaning against his truck, arms crossed, watching kids stream through the front doors, with backpacks bouncing and lunchboxes half open. The usual rhythm. Comfortable. Then he noticed the stares. Not from the kids, but the parents. Two moms across the parking lot were whispering behind oversized sunglasses. A dad on his phone glanced up, then quickly looked away when Jack met his eyes. It was subtle but not subtle enough. Lily came bounding down the steps, Vivian walking just a few paces behind her. She was laughing genuinely with Lily about something, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair, sunlight catching the gold thread in her scarf. She didn't notice the eyes. Not yet. Jack opened the door for Lily, then glanced at Vivian. "Everything okay in there?" Vivian's smile faded a little. "Why?" He jerked his head toward the lot. "You're a bit of a celebrity today." Her face stiffened. "What happened?" "Don't know yet. But we're being watched." That evening, it unraveled. Rosie from the diner stopped by with a pie, which wasn't unusual, but her tone was overly polite, eyes scanning Vivian like she'd just seen a ghost. Jack waited until they were alone. Vivian stood at the sink, drying dishes, quiet. He handed her his phone. On the screen, a photo of her from a glossy magazine cover, all sleek angles and impossible heels, standing next to her father. Vivian Lancaster, the heiress with the world at her feet. Vivian didn't even blink. It was bound to happen. Someone recognized you at the school? Most likely one of the PTA moms. That article came out a few months ago. I never even read it. She paused. I think my father had it planted to quiet rumors. Jack exhaled, jaw tight. Now half the town knows. Vivian leaned against the counter, arms folded. I don't blame them for talking. I'd talk too. He looked at her, hard. You think I care about gossip? She didn't answer. But in her silence, he saw it clearly she was bracing for the fallout, for the shift in how people looked at her. For the moment, everything real started to feel like a performance again. And Jack, for the first time, wasn't sure if Maplewood was big enough to keep her hidden any longer. The knock on the garage office door came just after noon. Jack was under the hood of a rusted-out Buick, arms deep in grease and grit, when the sharp, deliberate rap, rap, rap cut through the hum of the shop's radio. He wiped his hands on a rag, muttered a quick curse under his breath, and headed toward the front. The man standing there didn't belong. Suit too perfect, shoes too clean, a leather briefcase tucked under one arm like it held the weight of kingdoms. His hair was slicked back, gray at the temples, and his eyes didn't wander. They locked on Jack like he already knew exactly who he was. You, Jack Morgan? Jack nodded slowly. Depends who's asking. The man extended a hand. Jack didn't take it. Warren Grayson, he said. Legal counsel for the Lancaster family. Jack's jaw tightened. I'd like a moment of your time. Regarding Miss Vivian Lancaster. Jack didn't move. She here? No. And she doesn't know I'm here either. May I come in? Jack opened the office door without a word, letting the man step inside. The space was cramped and smelled faintly of motor oil and burnt coffee. Warren didn't seem fazed. He placed the briefcase on the desk and opened it with a click. My clients are prepared to offer Miss Lancaster a formal agreement, he said, sliding a single folder forward. Return to New York. No press, no questions. A clean transition back into the family estate. In exchange, all current accounts will be unfrozen and reinstated. Jack crossed his arms. And what's the catch? Warren looked up, calm and cold. She walks away from this town. And from you. Jack didn't flinch, but his stomach turned. No further contact, no statements, no involvement with the girl Lily, is it? He closed the folder. They want to preserve the Lancaster image. Small-town entanglements aren't part of that. Jack leaned forward, voice low and steady. You really think money's going to fix this? Warren didn't blink. It usually does. Jack stared at the folder, then back at the man. You're going to regret showing up here. Warren stood, smoothing his jacket. I'll be staying at the inn through the weekend. Give her time to consider, but she will come back. She always does. As the door closed behind him, Jack felt the first crack of something deeper than anger fear. Because no matter what Vivian had told him, no matter how far she'd run, her old life had just caught up. Jack noticed the silence first. It was the kind that didn't make sense in a house with a 7-year-old. No hum of the shower. No clinking dishes from the kitchen. No faint sound of Vivian's laugh echoing down the hallway as Lily told her a story she'd already told twice. Just stillness. Too clean. Too sharp. He checked the guest room. The bed was made, perfectly. The blanket folded, pillow fluffed. On the dresser sat the borrowed sweatshirt she'd taken to wearing every night. Folded. Neat. Final. Gone. His heart thudded once hard. He moved to the back door. Her boots weren't there. Her duffel bag was missing. Her car wasn't in the driveway. She was just gone. Dad? Lily's small voice broke the quiet. She stood in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, hair sticking up in every direction. She looked around the living room, then into the kitchen. Where's Vivian? Jack opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. He knelt down and touched Lily's shoulder. She left. Lily frowned. She didn't say goodbye. I know, he said, swallowing thickly. She should have. They had pancakes that morning, but neither of them ate much. Jack burned the first batch, and Lily only pushed syrup around her plate. Every corner of the house felt like it was missing something, like a chair had been pulled out from the table and no one had put it back. At the shop, Jack barely spoke. His hands worked, but his mind was somewhere else, on a porch kiss, on storm-lit confessions, on the scent of coffee in the morning and the sound of her laugh when Lily told her she should run for President of Pies. By evening, he'd gone through her name in his phone 5 times. No messages. No calls. Just gone. That night, as Lily sat curled on the couch with a blanket up to her chin, she asked softly, "Did she not like us?" Jack sat beside her, heart twisting. "She liked us, baby. I think she just didn't know how to stay." Lily didn't answer. She just leaned into him, and Jack held her tighter than usual, the weight of absence pressing down harder than he expected, because the house wasn't just quieter now, it was emptier. And he knew deep down that something real had walked out that door and might never come back. Jack saw it by accident. It was a Tuesday, just after lunch, and the shop was slow, too slow. He sat behind the counter with an old cup of coffee and a tired glance at the world through the streaked front windows. Lily was at school. The radio played some soft rock station that barely held a signal. Everything felt like it had been wrapped in fog since the morning Vivian left. He wasn't looking for her. He told himself that every day. But still, when he opened his phone and scrolled through the news app out of habit, her name hit him like a punch to the chest. Lancaster Heiress located. Preparing for press conference in Manhattan. The headline was loud. The photo beneath it louder. Vivian, in a tailored black coat, stepping out of a car in front of the Lancaster corporate tower, head down, sunglasses on, surrounded by security. She looked like a ghost of herself. Every trace of the small-town woman who once laughed in his kitchen, who brushed flour from Lily's cheek and whispered truths in the dark, had vanished behind polished edges and scripted silence. Jack clicked the article. Read it twice. She had been reunited with her family. No mention of where she'd been. No talk of why she left. Just carefully crafted statements about time away, clarity, and recommitting to the future of the Lancaster legacy. The press conference was scheduled for Thursday. Rumors hinted she'd take her place as the official heir to the Lancaster empire. Jack set the phone down slowly, the room around him blurred. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring at the faded photo of her on the counter taken by Lily, on that last good night, Vivian mid-laugh, a marshmallow stuck to her chin, her eyes soft and real. He should have known it would end this way. He should have never hoped for anything different. But the ache in his chest said otherwise. Because even if she hadn't said goodbye, even if she'd vanished without a word, some part of him had still believed she wouldn't go back. Not really. Not to that world. Not without a fight. But now it looked like she already had. It was late. Jack was folding laundry in the living room, half watching some forgettable show flicker across the TV, when Lily wandered in, dragging her backpack behind her. "Dad, I couldn't find my sketch pad," she mumbled, sleep clinging to her voice. Jack set down a towel. "Did you check your bag?" She plopped it on the couch and unzipped it, flipping through the chaos of pencils, paper scraps, and candy wrappers. Then she froze. "What's this?" she asked, pulling out a small, cream-colored envelope-no stamp. No address, just a single word written in soft, looping script. Jack. His breath caught. He took the envelope slowly, hands suddenly still. The paper was heavier than it looked, expensive, familiar. His fingers hovered for a second before carefully opening the flap. Inside was a single folded page. Handwritten. "Jack, I never wanted to leave. Not like that. Not without a goodbye. Not without explaining why. But I knew, if I looked you in the eye, I wouldn't have the strength to go, and part of me thought you'd try to stop me. And I wasn't sure I'd be brave enough to let you. Warren showed up with a deal. My father's version of mercy. Silence in exchange for safety. I didn't take it. Not right away. But he made it clear, stay here. And you'd be in the crosshairs too. So would Lily. And I couldn't let that happen. Not after everything you've done for me. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. A real home. A quiet morning. A porch and a cup of coffee, and a little girl who reminded me what joy sounds like. I didn't think I could feel that again. I didn't think I deserved to. But I did. Because of you. This isn't goodbye. Not really. I'm going to fix this, Jack. I just don't know how yet. But I promise you I haven't forgotten. And I'm not done running. Just not away this time. Vivian, the letter trembled slightly in his hands. Lily tugged at his sleeve. Did she write that? Jack nodded, eyes glassy. Is she coming back? He didn't answer right away. He folded the letter carefully, held it to his chest, and whispered, I think she wants to. The engine hummed beneath them, steady and sure. As the highway stretched out like a ribbon of purpose beneath Jack's old truck, Lily sat in the passenger seat, legs tucked under her, a stack of coloring books balanced on her lap. She'd fallen asleep an hour ago, her head resting against the window, her breath fogging the glass in soft clouds. Jack kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the steering column tighter than necessary. The city was still hours away, but the distance didn't matter. Not anymore. He hadn't planned it, not really. The letter had been tucked into his coat pocket all week, folded and unfolded until the edges had softened and the creases blurred. He'd read it more times than he could admit, every word etched into his mind like a scar. Vivian hadn't said where to find her. She hadn't had to. He knew exactly where she'd be. Back in the world she hated. Surrounded by people who wore masks for a living. Preparing to smile for cameras that didn't know her name meant more than a headline. He didn't know what he'd say when he saw her. Didn't have a plan. Didn't have the right words. But he couldn't just sit back and let her disappear behind that wall of wealth and obligation. Not after everything they'd shared. Not after the way she made Lily laugh, or the way she kissed him like she was afraid it would be the last time. He glanced at the rearview mirror, watching the miles disappear behind him, then looked over at Lily. She stirred a little, eyes fluttering open. Are we there yet? Not yet, sweetheart, Jack said gently. But soon. Are we going to find Vivian? Jack nodded. That's the plan. Lily smiled sleepily. Good. I miss her. Yeah, Jack murmured, voice catching in his throat. Me too. The skyline of New York hadn't yet appeared, but Jack could feel it looming, the weight of it, the challenge. But he didn't care, because some things were worth driving straight into the storm for. The lobby of Lancaster Tower was made of glass and silence-polished marble floors, cold light, and people who moved like they belonged to a different world. Jack didn't. He knew that the second the doors closed behind him. He held Lily's hand tight as they moved through the crowd. She was wide-eyed, clutching her sketchbook against her chest like it was armor. Security guards eyed them as they passed, unsure whether to intervene. Jack didn't stop. He had a name, a purpose, and a stubbornness born of grease-stained years and hard-earned love. The press event was being held in the main conference room on the 30th floor. Jack followed the signs, heart pounding louder with every step. He didn't know if he'd get to her in time. He didn't even know what he'd say, but he knew he had to try. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Cameras flashed as he stepped into a room full of suits and journalists, microphones clustered on stands, lights glaring hot. The crowd was hushed, all eyes on the podium. And there she was. Vivian stood behind the lectern, flanked by her father and Warren Grayson, the same lawyer who'd darkened Jack's shop days ago. She wore a fitted navy dress, hair swept back, expression unreadable. Jack couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then she spoke. I want to thank everyone for being here today, Vivian began, voice steady. Practiced. I know the past few weeks have raised questions about my place in the Lancaster family and the future of our company. I was expected to come home quietly, to follow the script. Her father's jaw tightened. But I've decided not to, she said. The room shifted. Murmurs. A few reporters leaned forward. I'm not taking over the company. I'm not returning to the boardroom. And I'm not signing any agreement that forces me to forget who I've become these past few months. Warren stepped forward, clearly alarmed. Her father leaned in, whispered something sharp. Vivian didn't flinch. "I'm done pretending," she said, louder now. "And if that means walking away from the Lancaster name, so be it." The room erupted flashes, gasps, questions flying, and in that moment her eyes found his across the crowd. Jack stood still, Lily by his side, heart thundering. Vivian's lips parted in the softest smile. She hadn't forgotten. She was choosing. And this time, she was choosing them. The chaos in the room was deafening cameras, clicking in rapid fire, reporters shouting over one another, and the Lancaster family's PR team scrambling like a dam had just burst. But Vivian didn't waver. She stood at the center of the storm, spine straight, voice clear as she leaned toward the microphone. "I'm not going back to the life I was told I had to live. I'm not a brand. I'm not an asset. I'm a person." Her father's face had gone cold, his lips drawn into a tight, unreadable line. Warren Grayson was already whispering furiously into his earpiece, motioning to a pair of men near the back. Vivian didn't blink. "I'm staying in Maplewood. That's where I found something real where. I found people who saw me instead of a last name." The crowd reacted in ripplesome, surprised, others skeptical. But Jack didn't care what they thought. He could barely breathe as he stood with Lily just inside the doors, his hand still clutched around hers. Her father stepped forward, taking the microphone like he was rescuing a failing broadcast. "This is not the time or place for personal declarations," he said, voice like ice. "Vivian is emotional and confused. We will handle this internally." Vivian looked at him. Really looked. There was no fear in her eyes, just clarity. "No," she said quietly, but it echoed. "This is the place, and I'm not confused." He turned to her, expression hardening. "If you walk away now, the trust dissolves. The security, the name, it's all gone, permanently." She met his stare without a flinch. "Then take it." A hush fell over the room. "You think you're punishing me?" she continued, stepping away from the podium, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "But I'm finally free. I don't want the money. I don't want the empire. I want my life." She turned, heels clicking softly on the marble floor as she walked down the aisle past her father, past Warren, past flashing lights and stunned silence, straight to Jack. Lily looked up at her, eyes wide. "You came back." Vivian knelt down, smiling as tears welled in her eyes. "I told you I wasn't done running. I just had to figure out which way was home." Jack didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just opened his arms, and she walked straight into them, letting everything else fall away. The drive back to Maplewood felt different this time, lighter, warmer, like the air itself had been waiting for her to return. Vivian sat in the passenger seat of Jack's truck, her hand resting lightly on the armrest, eyes fixed on the fields rolling past in golden waves. She was quiet, not the way someone is hiding something, but the way someone breathes for the first time after holding it too long. Jack glanced at her every now and then, just enough to know she was really there. "You sure about this?" he asked once, not accusing, not pushing. Vivian turned to him, the corner of her mouth lifting. "I've never been more sure of anything." When they pulled into the gravel drive, Lily was already at the door. She flung it open and ran barefoot across the yard before the truck had even come to a stop. Vivian stepped out and knelt just in time to catch her in a tight hug, Lily's arms wrapped fiercely around her neck. "I missed you," Lily said, her voice muffled. "I missed you more," Vivian whispered back, her eyes glassy. Inside, the house was just as she remembered, worn in and warm. The faint scent of fresh laundry and motor oil still clung to the air, along with something comforting, familiarity. Life. She paused in the doorway for a beat, taking it all in. That's when she saw it. Taped crookedly to the refrigerator with a cat-shaped magnet was a drawing in bright crayon colors. A stick-figure version of Vivian stood between two others, Jack and Lilla beneath. A smiling sun and a house with smoke curling from the chimney. At the top, in uneven handwriting, "Welcome back, Vivian." Her hand went to her mouth. Jack stood behind her, watching the moment unfold like he knew exactly how much it would mean and how badly she needed it. "I didn't help her with that," he said softly. "She did it the day after you left, just in case." Vivian turned, tears slipping down her cheeks, and hugged Lily again, holding her like something precious. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't visiting. She was home. The days that followed were quiet, not in the absence of sound kind of way, but in the way a soul settles after running too long. Vivian woke each morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lily's laughter drifting down the hallway. She'd traded tailored dresses for rolled-up sleeves and denim, high heels for scuffed sneakers. Her hair was usually tied back, her nails no longer perfectly manicured, and for the first time in her life, none of it mattered. She was finally becoming someone she recognized. She started volunteering at the local library 3 days a week, sorting through books and helping kids find stories to fall into. Mrs. Dorsey, the head librarian, had eyed her skeptically at first. No one in town forgot the Lancaster headlines overnight, but Vivian didn't flinch under the scrutiny. She shelved books, cleaned out closets, even led story time on Wednesdays. By the second week, Mrs. Dorsey offered her a part-time position. "You're not bad for a runaway billionaire," the older woman said with a dry smile. Vivian just laughed. "Don't tell anyone. I'm trying to build a new brand." In the afternoons, she stopped by Rosie's diner to help with the lunch rush. Rosie had been hesitant, her sharp eyes always 2 steps ahead. But when Vivian showed up in an apron and washed dishes without complaint, something shifted. By week's end, she was learning how to pour coffee with one hand and plate pancakes with the other. She didn't tell people who she had been. She didn't need to. Here, she wasn't Vivian Lancaster. She was just Vivian, the woman who helped little kids with library cards and made a decent grilled cheese at Rosie's. At night, she and Jack would sit on the porch, side by side, their conversations slow and unforced. Sometimes Lily would join them, falling asleep curled up on Vivian's lap with her latest library book still open. There were still whispers, still looks. But they softened with time. Because she wasn't pretending anymore. She was choosing this life. Every dish washed, every story read, every moment shared with the man and the little girl who made her feel more whole than an empire ever had. The old brick building on the corner of Main and Sycamore had sat vacant for years, dusty windows, cracked pavement, a faded for lease sign that had curled with age. Most folks in town had given up on it, figured it would eventually be torn down or left to rot. But Jack had always seen something else, a future, a dream. A place with his name on the sign and grease under his fingernails that didn't belong to someone else's business. And now, it was real. Morgan Motors. The name stretched across the front in bold navy letters, hand-painted by a retired teacher Jack used to fix lawnmowers for. The glass had been cleaned, the floors re-poured, the bays fitted with new lifts and tools Jack had once only allowed himself to admire in catalogs. It wasn't flashy, but it was his, and it never would have happened without Vivian. She'd come to him weeks ago, a manila folder full of paperwork, and a look that brooked no argument. "It's not a handout," she'd said firmly. "It's a partnership. You're building something, and I believe in it. And I want to invest in something real for once." Jack had argued, naturally, but eventually, he'd stopped. Because deep down, he wanted her in this with him not as a benefactor, but as someone building a life. And now, standing beneath the midday sun, with half of Maplewood crowding the lot and Rosie passing out lemonade in plastic cups, Jack watched Vivian laugh with Lily beside a new banner that read, "Grand Opening Today." She wore jeans and a t-shirt that read, "Yes, I know how to use a wrench," courtesy of Lily, who had insisted on matching shirts. Her hair was up, smudged faintly with dust from setting up tool displays, and she looked happier than Jack had ever seen her. Mayor Henson gave a small speech about local dreams coming true, and Jack cut the ribbon with oversized novelty scissors, which Lily then promptly tried to run off with. After the applause, Jack turned to Vivian and said, Still think you're just passing through? Vivian grinned. Not a chance. Morgan Motors wasn't just a business. It was a promise. A second chance for all of them. The knock came just after sunset, soft and measured polite, in a way that felt out of place on Jack's front porch. Vivian was in the kitchen, helping Lily decorate cookies with entirely too much frosting, the sounds of laughter and clinking spoons filling the house. Jack wiped his hands on a towel and answered the door, expecting Rosie or maybe one of the neighbors dropping by with borrowed tools or small talk. But the man on the other side wasn't from Maplewood. Tall, sharply dressed in a way that looked uncomfortable against the soft evening light, the stranger had the kind of presence that said he was used to being listened to. But it was his eyes that caught Jack familiar in a way he couldn't quite place, a mix of hesitation and pride wrapped in something unspoken. "Can I help you?" Jack asked, keeping his voice even. The man smiled faintly. "I'm looking for Vivian." Jack hesitated. "And you are?" The man extended a hand. "Matthew Lancaster, her brother." Jack didn't move. "You from the legal team?" "No," Matthew said quickly. "Not part of the cleanup crew. Just family. Or what's left of it." From the kitchen, Vivian's voice floated in. "Jack, who is it?" She appeared in the doorway a second later, apron dusted with powdered sugar, her hair a mess, and her cheeks flushed from laughing with Lily. When she saw him, she froze. Matthew's smile softened. "Hey, Viv." Vivian didn't move for a moment. Then she stepped forward, her voice uncertain. "You came." "I had to see it for myself," he said. "You, this place, everything." Vivian glanced at Jack, who stepped back and let her through. They sat on the porch while the sun dipped behind the trees. Two siblings, who hadn't spoken in years now, separated by time, choices, and the weight of a last name that had shaped too much of their lives. "I always thought you'd disappear into a penthouse," Matthew said quietly. "Not a town with a population smaller than our boardroom." Vivian smiled. "Turns out it's easier to find yourself in a place where no one's trying to own you." He nodded slowly. "Is it real, all of this?" Vivian looked through the window. Lily, dancing in the living room, Jack leaning in the doorway with his usual quiet patience, and answered without hesitation. "Yes. It's the most real thing I've ever had." And for the first time in a long time, her brother looked at her not with judgment, but something close to understanding. The days that followed Matthew's visit unfolded like chapters in a story Vivian never thought she'd get to rewrite. He didn't leave right away. Instead, he stayed in town longer than expected, booking a modest room at the Maplewood Inn, wearing his city shoes through muddy fields and small-town sidewalks. At first, it was awkward, stilted conversations, long pauses, the kind of quiet you build around old wounds. But slowly, the tension cracked. Over coffee at Rosie's, he admitted he'd been watching from the sidelines, reading the headlines, seeing the photos, wondering if she'd really broken free or if it was just another Lancaster move. It wasn't. He saw that now. Vivian told him things she'd never shared before, not just about Jack or Lily, but about the way it felt to finally live a life that didn't demand performance. She confessed the guilt, the doubt, the night she almost turned back. Matthew listened, then told her things she hadn't expected to hear. How he'd envied her nerve, how their father had already started grooming another heir, and how he had always wanted out, too. That cracked something open between them. By the end of the week, he was helping Lily build a birdhouse behind Jack's shop, sleeves rolled up, tools in hand, laughing louder than Vivian had ever heard from him. And he wasn't the only one. A few days later, Vivian got a letter from her Aunt Clara, mother's sister, who had been quietly following her story from afar. They hadn't spoken in years, not since Claire had fallen out with the family over image issues. But the note was warm, handwritten, and ended with an invitation. "If you're rebuilding, I'd love to help." Vivian stood on the porch that night, watching Lily chase fireflies in the fading light, Jack beside her with a cup of coffee in hand. The town had grown quiet again, and for once, so had the thoughts in her head. She had spent so long thinking she had to choose legacy or escape, family or freedom. But here, in this unlikely little corner of the world, she had found something better. She wasn't just building a new life, she was building a real one. And for the first time, family didn't mean control, or conditions, or expectations. It meant love, laughter, and showing up just as you are. The sky was painted in soft oranges and deep lavender as the sun dipped low over Maplewood. Fireflies blinked lazily across the yard, and the air carried that unmistakable hum of summer winding down. Jack had planned the evening without saying much. Grilled dinner on the back porch, Lily's favorite lemonade, a blanket laid out under the old oak tree where she'd strung fairy lights weeks ago, for the stars to feel welcome. Vivian sat beside him on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder, her fingers loosely laced with his. Lily had long since gone inside, tired from a day spent climbing trees and helping Rosie make cinnamon rolls for the morning rush. Jack reached into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing the small wooden box he'd carved weeks ago in the shop after hours. It wasn't fancy. No velvet, no jewelry store price tag. Just simple, honest craftsmanship like everything else he offered. He handed it to her without a word. Vivian looked down at it, brows drawing slightly together in surprise. "What's this?" "Open it," Jack said quietly. Inside, cushioned on a scrap of soft fabric, sat a single brass key, his spare house key. The one that had sat in his junk drawer for years, untouched. Vivian stared at it, lips parting slightly. "No ring," he said, before she could speak. "Not yet. Not because I'm not sure. I've never been more sure, but because I want to ask you something first." She looked up at him, eyes shining, but said nothing. He reached for her hand. "You've been running most of your life. And for a while I thought maybe I should let you keep going, let you figure it out on your own." He paused, heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with hope. "But now, I know better. I don't want you to go. Not back to that world. Not anywhere. So here it is." He held her gaze, steady and full of quiet conviction. "Will you stay for good?" Vivian stared at him for a long breath, then down at the key, then back up again. Tears pooled, but didn't fall. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." And in that one word, the future stopped feeling uncertain. It simply began. The park looked nothing like it had the day they first met. That day, the air had been thick with heat and tension, her car steaming on the shoulder, Jack's hands covered in grease and caution. But no one this morning. The park was filled with sunlight, wildflowers, and quiet joy. They didn't send out formal invitations. There were no gold-embossed programs, no designer gown fittings or catered menus. Just a handwritten sign posted outside Rosie's diner that read, "Morgan, Lancaster Wedding, Saturday at noon. All welcome. Bring a chair, if you've got one." Vivian wore a simple white dress she found in a second-hand boutique, soft lace at the sleeves and bare feet in the grass. Jack wore a clean shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a tie he let Lily pick out. She chose one with tiny cars on it. They married beneath the old oak tree, the one with the fairy lights Lily had strung weeks ago, now draped with sunflowers and blue ribbon. Rosie stood as the officiant, her usual sarcasm softened into something tender, and Matthew quietly supportive sat in the front row next to Lily, who held the rings in a velvet pouch she refused to let go of. Vivian looked at Jack with eyes full of peace, not promises she couldn't keep. "You didn't just save my car," she said during her vows. "You reminded me that I had the right to choose my own life. And that love, real love, doesn't come with a contract, it comes with a home." Jack took her hands, rough fingers brushing against her smooth ones. "I don't care what your last name is," he said. "You'll always be Vivian, the woman who changed everything without asking for anything, except maybe a second chance." When they kissed, it was slow, familiar, full of all the words neither of them had needed to say. The crowd cheered. Lily beamed like her heart might burst. There were no photographers, no headlines. Just homemade lemonade, off-key music from a borrowed speaker, and the smell of fresh pie cooling in the shade. And when the sun set, Jack, Vivian, and Lily stood beneath that same oak tree, arms wrapped around each other, fireflies blinking all around them. It wasn't the life she'd planned, it was the life she'd chosen. And it Wasnt, last happily, rewritten.